Alrighty folks, welcome back to another episode of the My Care Channel podcast. In our last episode, we had a look at the different programs for aged care services, which I think are overall pretty good and cover a substantial amount of needs for our older people. Taz, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was definitely really interesting. What I'm most interested about is how at the end you mentioned that there are some costs that you have to pay out of pocket. So I'm keen to talk more a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that could be probably another grey area almost within the aged care sector, because obviously people who are in aged care or people who are needing aged care have obviously given back to the Australian workforce their whole life. So shouldn't they be, why should they have to pay for these services? I think that's a pretty cool area of discourse, which could be maybe, talked about later on. So yeah, what do you think about that?
It also kind of addresses topics like, unapproved spending, where you'll have elderly people paying out of their own pockets, accounts like, costs that shouldn't have been there or should have been accounted for by the government. So I'm curious to see, what actually falls under that kind of category and how substantial are these costs for people who essentially can't make a living wage anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think it also comes down to who gets to make those. Well, obviously, we know who gets to make it, but why do they get to make those decisions and where do they draw the line? What sort of information they have in that. So, yeah, but yes, was there anything else that you wanted to add on before we kind of go into it?
What is the government doing to, regulate this kind of industry to make sure that, these elderly people aren't paying, heaps of money out of their own pockets, where commercial companies are just kind of making their profits?
Yep, exactly. And I feel like that question sort of goes across all our sectors in Australia. So yeah, but I feel like we should stick to the aged care sector today. So maybe did you want to go through some of the fees maybe that people could incur whilst they're in aged care?
For sure. So as we mentioned before, not all of the services that you get from the government will be subsidized by them. In particular, there are two fees that pretty much everyone will be subject to whilst they're involved with aged care services. The first, and I think the most important of them, is the basic daily fee, which is needed by both the Commonwealth Home Support Program and the Home Care Package Program. This price is needed by the aged care provider you choose to go with, and because of this, it is up to them for how much they're looking to charge. Andrea, do you reckon people should pay for this out of their own pockets?
Look, like I said before, I think people work in the workforce for how long? Like we're both in our 20s now. We're expected to retire when we're 65, 70s. That I can't remember. I think that's around the age. So that is a good 40, 45 years giving back to the workforce, right? I personally feel like we should not have to pay this daily fee because we've already worked for 45 years, giving back to the Australian government, making the economy, stimulate the economy and all that jazz. So I personally think if the fee should either be included in the subsidization of the government's, prices, or they can have a universal fee maybe and, cut down on prices rather than it be individual to each aged care provider. But do you agree or play devil's advocate? What do you think, Taz?
Oh, okay. I really like the first option that you mentioned, in terms of having it just subsidized by the government. But obviously, some people do need extra amenities, and obviously there will be a point where some people can afford more. But we do need to equalize that gap because, no matter the socioeconomic status of any elderly senior Australian citizen, they should all have the same basic access to aged care and healthcare services. There definitely has to be more regulation and, for sure, subsidization in the field.
Yeah, definitely. And I think maybe, again, to play the devil's advocate here, maybe the only reason why the daily fees should be varied would be like what you said, if one person needs more services than another. So I guess it would make sense. It doesn't make sense actually for one person who only needs, a lift at home to pay the same fee as someone who needs physio, any other allied healthcare service, it doesn't make sense in that case. So I can see why there are variations in the daily care fee, but I just personally feel like that all should be subsidized by the government entirely. So yeah, were there any other thoughts maybe that you had about that, or what do you think?
It's interesting because it kind of makes me think about the way that, our taxation system is kind of built upon. We have a system where people who are, earning more are giving more tax. Maybe that should
Yeah.
kind of apply similarly to aged care and healthcare. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the saying, the better that we all do as a population, the better we all do as individuals. And I think the
Yeah.
same ethos should apply to aged care.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I feel like the Australian government has kind of taken that into account because there is another fee which doesn't apply to everyone. So not everyone will really need to pay it, but it's the income tested care fee, which is meant for those whose total income is above the basic pension rate. So an income assessor, so someone individual, will verify that for you and tell you how much you need to pay. So I guess I feel like you might maybe already agree with this.
Yeah,
but
I
do you think it's
definitely
necessary
do.
or no?
You already know my point. I definitely agree, and I think it's a great advancement and something that was very well done and well regulated in the system.
Yeah, definitely. I think people actually had the same thoughts as you. Maybe when this was instituted, people had the same thoughts as you as to, people who are way more wealthier when they, complete their time in the workforce. They'll have to pay, some other fee in order to kind of make it more equitable.
Yeah,
so I think,
sure.
people are definitely on the same page with you about that, which is great. I think it leads to a much more fairer Australia almost. So that's really good. Okay, yes.
Maybe to end on a bit of a happy note, if the government's decided that you've paid a fair amount of money either over the year or since you've started aged care, they've instituted annual and lifetime caps, which are just what they look like. The lifetime cap is pretty straightforward. However, with the annual cap, you won't be required to pay any fees till either the next anniversary of when you started in aged care or until you no longer feel like you need aged care services. What do we think about this, Andrina?
Yeah, I think this sort of brings it full circle to what I was mentioning before in that aged care daily fee services or just aged care in general. Well, I guess a lot of fees are already subsidized by the government, but I think this cap almost allows for the daily fee service to be subsidized as well to an extent. So I feel like it kind of brings it full circle, what we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. What do you think about it, Taz?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Again, it's probably one of the more progressive kind of advancements in the system that we've seen so far. So I definitely applaud it, and I think we're doing great for it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really nice way for the government to sort of almost like tip their hat to them, or tip their cap. Sorry, the pun just needed to be said. But just almost, tip their hat to everyone who's in aged care. Like, thank you for all your, everything that you've given to us and continue to give to us, as you continue to live in Australia. So I think it's a really nice way for the Australian government to almost, make people in aged care feel like they're still kind of valued almost. So I think there's a nice little thing 100%. There as well. Was there anything else that you wanted to add then, Taz?
No.
Perfect. Well, I think that about wraps it up. So we've covered the main differences between the CHSP, HCP, and gone through some potential extra fees that might be needed for aged care services. We really hope you've enjoyed listening into our podcast. And if you're looking for further information, be sure to browse the My Care channel for any further questions. Until our next episode, bye for now.